Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. Thank you for tuning in, listening, however you're consuming this podcast. We appreciate you. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Spread the word. My name is Caleb. I am on the Startup Junkie team, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff Amerine.
Glad to be here.
Glad
it's Friday afternoon.
Absolutely.
Go Hogs.
Absolutely. And we are joined today by TJ. TJ, how's it going?
Pretty good, Caleb. It's nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. It was such a smooth intro.
I don't know about all that. I've done it a couple times. So TJ is the CEO of SupplyPike. So tell us about SupplyPike.
Yeah. So SupplyPike is a software company. We build B2B SaaS products targeting suppliers.
Yeah.
So this is anybody who sells into a Target or a Walmart or Amazon. So those are our customers. So like the problem that we solve is that essentially retailers buy the products from these suppliers wholesale, and then they sell it back to the customers, which is you and me. When we go to Walmart, buy these products, go to Amazon and buy these products. But for the retailers to sell the products to us and make sure there's enough products on the shelf, they need to make sure that there's enough product in their warehouses to meet the demand. So the retailers put a lot of constraints on the suppliers to make sure that the suppliers are sending them enough product. And oftentimes these constraints are really strict and severe. And suppliers are not able to meet these constraints. So they get hit with like a ton of fines, like up to like 20% of their revenue. So what SupplyPike does is we come in, we help them understand where they're losing money, like identify. A lot of times suppliers don't even know that they're hemorrhaging tons of money. So we help identify that, and then we help either recover some of those fines. Sometimes those fines are invalid because of supply chain errors. And sometimes those fines are valid. And if those fines are valid, which means that the supplier didn't meet their side of the obligation to the retailer, we help them understand why they didn't and try to give them like tools to fix their supply chain so they can be more compliant. So at a 50,000 foot view, that's kind of what we do. But does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But give us this is the part where we do kind of the Wolverine Marvel origin story.
Okay.
Wind it back before that. What led you to SupplyPike? Give us a little bit of your history before you got to SupplyPike.
A little bit of history before I got to SupplyPike.
The stuff that you can disclose.
Okay.
I know witness protection program sometimes doesn't allow it, but
yeah. So it started like a decade ago. It started like 10 years ago when I first met Dan. Dan hired me to help lead his R&D division at KStack. So Dan and I were building a lot of software, and first of all, internally to help KStack to make them more efficient. So we built a TMS to manage all their freight. We built like the scheduling algorithms to sort of route the trucks between the different warehouse campuses. We built algorithms to like pack the trucks. And then we started slowly building stuff that was not necessarily consumed by KStack, but was targeted towards the CPGs themselves.
Right.
So we started experimenting, doing a lot of trial and error stuff, and eventually, some of those products had product market fit, got some traction. So when KStack was acquired by Hub Group for $250 million a few years ago, we got spun out from them to be a separate company, and that's kind of how we started. So now we exist as a fully standalone company, fully arm's length from KStack.
Venture backed, right?
Venture backed.
Yeah,
We raised 15 million Series A when we got spun out. So that's kind of like the quick story of how we came to be.
And Sanker is still a good drinking buddy, right? He still hangs out and
he's our chairman of our board. He's pretty involved. Dan's great.
And
good deal.
Inside baseball, Dan Sanker is also on the Startup Junkie board too. So
he is
for those.
Okay.
Yes.
That's nice. Dan's everywhere.
And when he gets done with his supply chain related career, he's definitely going to be opening act for Adam Sandler, Dave Chappelle, or somebody.
Dan's hilarious.
He's got the personality of and the wit of a stand-up comedian. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Dan Sanker, friend of the show. Absolutely.
Lots of plugs today.
For sure. So, now is a really interesting time in supply chain. In fact, you can see a number of different graphics online that show all the disruption and ships backed up at ports and all these disconnects and concerns over plastic products not making it and semiconductors and all that. What role does SupplyPike play in smoothing some of that out, or at least providing visibility on what's going on?
Yeah, over the last year or so, since the pandemic, really, like the demand has just shot up like astronomically, and just like companies are just not able to keep up with the demand, and that's kind of why we're seeing all these shortages everywhere. And even when you do have the product, there is such a scarcity for even basic things like freight and warehousing and all that. There's like heavy competition for that. So that's kind of the space that the CPGs are playing in. And a lot of the small CPGs, they don't really have the expertise to even make sense of what's happening in the supply chain.
Right.
Their expertise, like they're like mom and pop stores. Their expertise is in making the product, not necessarily supply chain.
Right. Sure.
So that's kind of where we come in. Our software not just provides like we get the data and we help them make sense of it, but what makes us unique is that we bake in the domain knowledge. We spend a lot of time like analyzing all these different supply chain partners and retailers, and sort of like modeling all these idiosyncrasies of all these like supply chain partners and baking that domain knowledge into our software itself. So when CPGs use our software, it not only just visualizes the data for them, but it actually tells them what to do. It's action-oriented. It tells them thresholds. It tells them where they need to be. And it gives them a button to take an action. Like it gives them a button that says, you don't have enough product in this warehouse. You got to move it. And here's a button for you to do that. You are losing money because there was some miscommunication in how much product was shipped, and you're owed this much money. Here's a button to go get that money. So it's very action oriented, and that's kind of why
it's a whole lot different than just visualization. I mean,
Exactly.
it's going to give you the actionable insight, and then you're able to intervene and do something about it.
Exactly, and that's kind of one of the ethos of SupplyPike. Like everything we do, it should be niche focused and can tie back to a persona. So yeah.
And I was reading an article, it's been a while, but from earlier in the year where it was SupplyPike's data that was kind of revealing some of those trends and shortages at Walmart. It seemed like it came directly from y'all's data. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. We released that industry report. We've amassed a bunch of customers now. We have like over 300 customers now. Across the whole spectrum of departments. We got, cosmetics, we got donuts, we got electronics, we got like everything you can imagine.
U.S. or worldwide?
U.S., Canada.
Mostly North America.
Yeah, North America. Yep. Mm-hmm. So we can sort of see trends across the industry, like what are people buying, what are people not buying, which departments are affected the most. So we sort of aggregated all that data and synthesized it and published the report. And it's lots of really interesting trends, like as the pandemic rose and fell, you could see like what people were buying, what they were not buying. And like makeup was like took a really big hit. Pet food was like at a high sometime in like last April. Bicycles got really sold out. That like it was just interesting to see like what people were doing.
Was there anything there that like surprised you from that data that just stood out? It was like, wow, that's cool.
That stood out to me? Arts and crafts. Like I didn't realize arts and crafts was such a big industry. Like they like something like 10x or 15x last year. So that was like really shocking.
I guess there's only so much Netflix you can watch, right? Eventually it's like, okay, I've seen every series I'm done that's any good, that's got more than 3 stars, so better do some arts and crafts.
Stitching and stuff like that. It's really interesting to see that.
Very cool.
I mean, that's an alternative to doing what we do, which is just drink more. So that's cool.
Microphone.
Exactly.
So there's been a lot of, I guess, big news out of SupplyPike in recent weeks, months, including the acquisition of Supplier Community. So tell us a little bit about that. What led to that?
Yeah. So Supplier Community is a local company, and they really focus on being a champion for the supplier. They provide a lot of really actionable information for the supplier, keep them updated on industry trends, give them a lot of like educational content, like webinars, and even consulting even. So that was like perfect synergy for SupplyPike because we help suppliers with all these things. So, and we also have, SupplyPike has a sort of arm of SupplyPike called Supplier Wiki, which is sort of our editorial arm. So if you guys go to supplierwiki.com, we have a ton of like high quality content to help suppliers sort of navigate retail. And we even have courses to show them, like, if you're new to supply chain, here's what you need to know. Here's what all these glossary terms mean, and sort of walk them through a guided tutorial from beginner to expert. So like there was like perfect synergy between the two. So yeah, that's kind of like led to the acquisition, and essentially the goal is to try and merge our content together. So we'll be slowly incorporating all of Supplier Wiki's supplier community's content into Supplier Wiki. But yeah, it's been really exciting. It's the same exact audience that we're serving. So I think everyone will really benefit a lot from this. We're pretty excited. So.
It seems like with all the activity, so that was not nearly as big an acquisition, but it was interesting to see Uber Freight buy Transplace as well. Do you anticipate more consolidation where people that have sort of piece part solutions within supply chain and technology, do you anticipate more consolidation? Not just you guys, but in general.
Yeah, that was an interesting acquisition. I think like if you're looking at like the freight brokerage world, it's like heavily balkanized, and it's also heavily utilitarian. Like it's like the cheapest guy wins, and like having a lot of competition doesn't necessarily mean better for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think consolidation in the freight space makes a lot of sense. When I saw it, I was like, okay, I can see why they did that.
Yep.
But you can sort of see it in other places too. And when you sort of join forces, there's obviously economies of scale, especially when it comes to like leveraging your equipment. When you have hard like equipment that you need to manage, there's always lots of economies that come with scale. So it makes a lot of sense. I don't know what the future looks like, but I can sort of see that there'll be more of these acquisitions. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think whenever you've got disparate groups that are providing kind of a piece of the solution, I think there's an overall appreciation for end-to-end visibility and insights and whatnot. So I think some of the people that have attacked maybe a given segment. Another good example would be FourKite's acquisition of Haven. They needed the ocean freight visibility. They bought those guys, and so now they can provide more end-to-end visibility. So I think you'll see. I think it's just the way of the world within software and SaaS.
Like people start with one mode or one little niche,
and then they glue it together.
They grow it, and then they need like attached pieces.
It's not always good, right? I mean, sometimes we saw that in the database world when Oracle, they acquired PeopleSoft, and all of a sudden they kind of glue this behemoth thing together that's unwieldy,
it's monolithic, and it's like lowers competition. So there's
not always good, but it's sort of a natural order of things. Things start out distributed and fragmented, they become centralized. People get ticked off because they're centralized. They become distributed again.
Yeah. What's that famous quote? All money is made from bundling and unbundling.
Exactly. And eventually everything becomes an NFT.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
That's my next venture. It's just NFTs.
NFTs for Braves memorabilia, right? Just gonna, Braves clips, sure.
Yeah, that's a world I wish I had more time to spend into, like the whole crypto world.
And blockchain? I mean, are you guys thinking about blockchain within what you do? Is there a play there for some of it or not so much?
I think there is. It's a really interesting technology, and there's a lot of promise. At the end of the day, what it is, it's a centralized database that has a central source of truth that not one person owns. And there's a lot of value to that because there's no more he said, she said. Like, what happened. Because a lot of what we do is we connect all these different data sources. We connect with the carrier and the warehouses and these retailers, and we aggregate all this data. And we try to reconcile this data. We make sense of the data because there are obviously different parties are saying different things.
Right.
So like basically what we do is try to be that blockchain. So obviously having a central blockchain is a good thing. It may put something like SupplyPike out of business, but I think it'd probably be good for everybody. But I think the problem is that like it's such that the technology itself it's really cool in theory, but in practice it's really, really hard. And I think over time it'll get easier and easier, more available for like the normal people to implement.
Sure.
But right now it's very esoteric. There's a very niche community. And most of the developments that we see in the blockchain world are like in the finance sector. Right. Like you have like staking and like all this like interesting technology. They're rebuilding fintech inside of the blockchain. Yeah. So that's kind of where I see a lot of advancements, not so much in the supply chain space, but I bet it'll catch up though.
Yeah, eventually. Eventually, I mean, a lot of them will even liken it to it's Internet 3.0, right? I mean, it's reinventing the internet in general and the way we think about it, the way we think about money, the way we think about transactions, the way we think about contracts. I mean, It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet like in the future, like you could like send a shipment and you put like there's a smart contract that's applied, and when the shipment gets completed, like the contract automatically disseminates money to whoever's involved. Like here's
Exactly.
the carrier, the broker, like the retailer gets this. Oh, you didn't fulfill your obligation, and it's all done without like a central party orchestrating it. And that would be, I feel like that's probably going to happen in the next 20 years.
It almost seems like a non sequitur because they'll say it's a trustless system.
Yeah.
In that no one, you're not trusting any one person.
Yeah.
Because the system is what provides the trust because it's decentralized.
Exactly.
It's interesting. Hey, folks, Jeff Amerine here. Thanks again for tuning into the Startup Junkies podcast. Steve Blank, the father of modern entrepreneurship, recently called the book that Jeff Standrich and I wrote, Creating Startup Junkies, a must-read playbook for anyone who wants to kindle innovation and entrepreneurship in their community. This whole idea of building sustainable venture ecosystems in unexpected places gives you the tools, the techniques, and the inspiration to do what we've done in Northwest Arkansas and Central Arkansas in your neck of the woods. If you'd like to find out more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. Thanks again. Interesting stuff.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm here. Our audio engineer Jacob will get on to me if
reload
yeah.
the I mean, what is this we're drinking? Is this like
champagne? I'm not sure. I don't know where it came from.
Is this Don Perignon or something?
I don't know. Can we Photoshop that on there?
Yeah, this is like Don California or something. It's not even good enough to be called champagne, but that's what we drink. That's how we roll.
But I ran into our audio engineer at a food truck last night and he got the last of their French fries. So I'm mad at him, but I'll move the mic up to appease him in this instance.
Okay. What technologies are you guys excited about? You guys see a lot of startups. Like, what is something that you're,
that's actually a good question. We're going through the process of the Fuel Accelerator right now. So there's some really interesting companies in there that are from all over the country. And we also are in the second cohort of our Arkansas Korea Alliance Korean testbed. And so we're seeing some really amazing stuff in AI, solving interesting problems, AI associated with imaging, AI associated with anonymization of images so that you can still gather traffic information on stores or airports or whatever. We've seen some really interesting stuff around active shooter detection.
Oh, wow.
Which is really cool. Systems that can be deployed in schools or airports or any kind of facility.
So like the computer vision system that will detect.
Exactly. And it's not all high tech digital bits and bytes stuff. We're also seeing some really interesting kind of future of protein, plant-based protein products that have mouthfeel of beef or pork or whatever else. And I get excited about all of it. And I've had enough conversations about NFTs and kind of the future of all that the one thing that I think is really interesting about NFTs, and I know so little about it, I almost hate to talk about it on air, is the fact that somebody that creates an original work of art or music can essentially certify, verify, codify their ownership in that at the time of creation without it being replicated or copied by someone else. So it brings the whole idea of copyright protection in many ways to a whole new level. And people can figure out how to monetize these original works of art. I think it could really disrupt the art world and the music world in really meaningful ways. And video, video art, performing art as well and all that stuff. So
so it sounds like you dabble in like a whole bunch of fields.
Oh, we see everything. We see everything from
top of the funnel.
Your soul food truck idea of the week to nanomaterials that can be used in impact-resistant military helmets. And I mean, everything you can imagine walks through that door. Yeah. And some stuff we wish didn't walk through that door. but we love all our clients. So
as you look at the
we love all our clients.
And we're here for you.
I mean, it's mostly good. It's mostly good. But I would say we generally have an optimism about the future as supported by the technologies that are coming out. And we also occasionally have conversations with robotics and automation. There's going to be more institutional unemployment associated with that. How do you deal with that? So it's not like we're just randomly thinking that it's all going to be fantastic. But I don't imagine that our thoughts about that are any different than what the people were thinking when you could see the Industrial Revolution kicking in automobiles and buses and mass transportation replacing horses and carriages and all that went along with that.
Yeah.
This is not new. It's just happening at a quicker rate, I think.
Way faster rate. And, I think think like in the next 50 years, 60 years, we'll probably solve like artificial general intelligence, where we essentially have intelligence that is as smart as or smarter than humans. And then like, what do we do then? You know, like do we need to have something like universal basic income? Like you got to like figure out how to feed everybody and make sure everyone has like all the Maslow's hierarchy of needs met. And like the hardest one is like purpose, you know, like what do we do with our lives once we don't have to?
We get off on some of this esoteric stuff. KJ, I can see the look on Caleb's face. He's like, not another episode like that one. But no, I mean, you know, there's a lot of conversation. So we affiliated with Rev Unit on some of the Singularity University stuff, and the whole premise there. The original idea of singularity is at some point there's this merger of digital intelligence and organic intelligence. And from my own way of thinking, I think that's the only way the human species is able to occupy faraway worlds because the distances are so great. So you can imagine a scenario where somehow the human intelligence is manifested in something digital, and then you have the ability to travel great distances because aging is not relevant.
If you can't beat them, you got to join them.
Well, exactly.
Merge with the machine.
Well, and you figure a machine would have a way of being self-replicating in a way that or some smart people, a lot smarter than me, figure out how to reverse cell aging and the oxidation that happens with human cells to where your lifespan goes from 100 years to 1,000. But again, all that stuff means you got to have more than one place to go. Because if people start living a really long time, we run out of space pretty quick.
Right. If you solve immortality, there's going to be a lot of people.
All of a sudden, it's going to be far worse than living in a crowded apartment in Manhattan because there'll be way too many of us.
It's a good thing the universe is so big.
This is the kind of stuff that Elon talks about. I'm sure that
he's going to be on the podcast next week.
Is he?
No.
You want to come back?
I talk about him like I know him. But it is the kind of thing that those guys that have lots of money consider the survival of the human race is the idea that we need to be interplanetary, which has not a lot to do with SupplyPike, other than you guys will be in a position to do the intergalactic supply chain management.
Once we exit SupplyPike, we're going to work on space tech.
Exactly.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because it is going to happen. It is inevitable that we will probably be multiplanetary. We will probably run out of resources on Earth. We will have to figure out how to harvest energy from other places. Like maybe we build like a Dyson sphere and get the energy from the sun. And, we do all these cool tech stuff. So I'm very optimistic about the future.
And you never know. It could be a Total Recall type of deal where we create an atmosphere on Mars or something and you can occupy some of these other places. Cool. Yeah, it's very interesting. But so you've had this great run at SupplyPike. And what's the vision look like for SupplyPike? Where are you guys headed? Do you want to be the big animal in that space where you're acquiring more companies and you go public at some point? What's that look like?
Yeah. So what SupplyPike is at its core is a data fabric. So if you look at SupplyPike and zoom out 50,000 foot, we integrate with carriers, warehouses, retailers, 3PLs, and suppliers, obviously, and we suck in all their data and we centralize it. And we can see everything that's happening in the supply chain. We can stitch, correlate, and predict what's happening. So the compliance stuff, the deductions and chargebacks, all of that stuff is a low-hanging problem that we're solving today, mainly because it is such a pressing issue right now because it's precipitated by all the COVID stuff, and crazy demand.
Sure.
But really what we want to do is we want to expand beyond that, we want to use this data to model supply chain behavior, because not only can we predict what's going to happen with customer demand and where you need the products to be, we can also predict the goodness of different supply chain partners. Mm-hmm. We can give scorecards to each of your partners, and we can model their latency and their lead times. We can say if your customer demand is going to be this much next week, here's how much product you need to have across your supply chain. Here's how much you need in your store, in your DC, in your manufacturing facility. Mm-hmm. And not only can we predict that, we can actually move that. We can actually move the products because we're already integrated into all these partners. We can take actions. We can actually go in and be move 5 products from this warehouse to this warehouse. Mm-hmm. So we can be action oriented. So if we know where everything needs to be and we're action oriented, we can automate the entire process end to end. So that's really our goal. We want to automate replenishment, which is the bulk of what happens in supply chain.
Sure.
It is replenishment. So that's really our end goal. And we're working towards that, and we need a lot of data because it's all, at the end of the day, you can't code it.
Sure.
It could be like if X is less than Y, you can't do that. So we need lots of data to do that. So we're using deductions, chargebacks. It is a stepping stone, but we want to solve automated replenishment, and in some ways, that's like the bulk of supply chain.
Yeah.
So that's our grand vision.
And by solving the automated replenishment, you remove all that whiplash that's associated with the disconnect between supply and demand, and it getting people ordering too much or not enough because they really don't have the visibility into what's coming.
Yeah, exactly. The whiplash effect. That's a good one. Yeah, that's like the bulk of why people can't handle supply chain is because of the whiplash effect.
Yeah.
Because they don't know, because they're usually most analysts, they're operating on a week-to-week or 2-week basis.
Right.
They're not really thinking like, oh, what's going to happen 2 months from now?
Right.
So, and bullwhip effect, it takes a while for it to manifest.
Yeah.
So, the container shortage, you're not going to know how that's going to affect you, really. So that modeling the bullwhip effect is the big chunk of it. And once you model it and you can predict with a high degree of confidence what those latencies are going to be, I think that's going to be a secret sauce. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, once you model it, you can actually eliminate it. If you can control all aspects of it, you can just eliminate it.
Sure.
So I think that's a two-stage approach.
And it gets even better and better as you have participants in what you guys offer from the point of raw material production to the point of consumption. Then you can provide those signals that allow people to take actions all the way along, which removes the ripples and all the ups and downs.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And at the end of it, it's all about data. So we're data.
Speaking of data, Data Lab. It's a product of yours. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, man, you guys did your research. Wow.
One of us did. I just want to talk about Singularity and interplanetary
travel. Data Lab is a new product we just launched. So, like I said, we collect a lot of data, and a lot of what we do with that data is build these apps that are action oriented. We don't necessarily expose that data to the supplier in any way, but Data Lab was there to sort of fix that. It is a way for suppliers to access the data that we already store and normalize and have in our warehouses, so they can query us to see what's happening in their supply chain. It's just a raw data dump. Tell us, the supplier can ask us a question give me this field, and this field, and these fields could be across different supply chain partners. We do the map and we do the reduce, and then we send them a spreadsheet. It's here's the data that you wanted. And it's ultra fast because, our data stores are super fast. And it's much easier than them going to each 4 partners and exporting it and pivoting it and all that. So it's just a way to expose that data that we already have. People really like that. When you go to large companies, they kind of know what they're doing. They have their own processes that they've honed for the last 15 years.
Right.
And they're just give me the data. So it works great for those types of companies. Small guys, probably not so much though.
I did my homework, but you teed that up for me. You're talking about data.
All right. I'll take credit.
Thank you.
Sure. As you're growing a tech company in Northwest Arkansas, what has been the biggest challenge with finding the kind of talent that you need to continue to keep the company growing, or what's your strategy and your approach with that? Because there's no question it's a war for talent right now to get the best and brightest to continue to grow.
Yeah, talent is everything. And finding good people is hard because, they already have jobs. Why are they going to leave their good jobs to join you? We work really hard at that. It's because what we try to do is really showcase our culture. We've tried really hard to hire smart people and keep them happy. And we do that by having a work environment where people get a lot of autonomy. They get a lot of freedom to sort of, spread their wings. And we try not to micromanage. We try not to have a lot of red tape unless it's absolutely necessary.
Sure.
And that allows smart people to come in and play. And we also try to do a good job of extricating people who just want to flex their muscle and be play ego wars or whatever. So the combination of that makes it SupplyPike really enticing. It's a playground for really smart people. So that has helped us attract high quality talent. So we've sort of grown a reputation and a brand, especially at the university and just in North Arkansas in general. So that's sort of helped us attract a lot of talent. But man, at the end of the day, it is really hard competing with like the behemoths, like the larger companies, the Fortune 500 companies. Sure. And they have a lot of muscle, they have a ton of resources that they can throw at it. And as a startup, you would think that there is a little bit of a startup discount when it comes to salaries, but there isn't. So we're like, that's like a challenge that we're trying to figure out. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
So those are some of the constraints and some of the ways we try and solve it. But how are you guys seeing that, like when in your portfolio companies?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Great Resignation is a real thing, and it gets talked about a lot. And so a couple of things. During the pandemic, I think people became very introspective about what they were doing and the place they were working. And even in places that are great to work, people realized it's kind of a buyer's market from the talent side. So I can trade up anytime I want and go on to something better. And I think every portfolio company we've had has had a similar kind of experience. Some of them that, and this is for large companies as well, that aren't adapting well to hybrid or work remote type of realities, are struggling even more. If people still have the kind of manufacturing, building license plates, traditional 1955 management mindset where you got to have everybody in-house or they're not going to be doing what they're supposed to do, they're going to struggle big time. Those that have adapted to and have reconciled with the fact that a lot of developers and professionals want to work from home at least part of the time and are comfortable with that, they're going to do fine. But it's like anything else. The markets are ruthlessly efficient, and the same is true in what we see is that those companies that we work with that have a great culture and that are doing interesting stuff are going to attract the best talent. There's no escaping that reality.
Where does the Great Resignation usually happen? Which industries and what type of jobs are you seeing?
Well, big time is anything related to restaurants and food and hospitality. A lot of those people that maybe they have bachelor's degree, but they had soft skills. They didn't have STEM related majors. They were in food service. They were making a good living at it, but it's hard work. And you're constantly facing customers that may not be real happy with what you're doing and getting dumped on. And a lot of them are just not coming back. They're just not coming back. So any of our clients that are in that space, I think they have the biggest challenge of all.
How do you fix that? Like, it seems like that's irreversible to some degree.
You pay them more. You change the way the game is played. You open for a few hours. I mean, there's lots of things that you got to think about in order to maintain profitability, but also attract the best people. And I honestly don't have a good answer for that.
Do you think automation would come in? Because at some point it'll be unscalable. Right?
Yeah, QSR's 100%.
What is that, QSR?
A quick service restaurant. So a quick service restaurant where you've got drive-throughs or automation. If there's a live human being in McDonald's in 15 years, I'd be shocked. So a lot of the fast food places are going to go with total automation. You drive through.
Rural McDonald's off of I-40 has the keypad to order your food.
And eventually you'll have, and this is one of the Korean companies we're working with has this, you'll have an AI human that is doing all of it that's not there. They've had somebody green screen model it that's got all the answers and the interaction, and you feel like you're talking to a real extremely polite.
It's like a drone operator. They're in a room somewhere else.
Or they don't have to be there at all. I mean, it will be completely autonomous.
Okay.
So it knows what the menu is and what the typical responses are, and bam. So I think that segment in particular is going to be highly disrupted. Highly disrupted.
Yeah, customer service. That would be funny if it got all dehumanized to some degree. It's all computers. But I bet we wouldn't feel it though. I bet we wouldn't feel like it's dehumanized because the AIs would have gotten so good.
Particularly when it's this interaction where and even visualization where the whole deep fake technology, where that lands shines in a good way is in customer service, in customer facing stuff where you're actually having a conversation with
Megan Fox just took my order at McDonald's.
Exactly. Imagine that, right?
You're giving your order to a fake person and eating fake meat when you're
exactly.
Well, what is fake anymore?
Yeah,
Lab
exactly.
produced.
If it's wrapped and it's got the logo on it, it's real, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that, we talked about a minute ago about technology accelerating, right? The next 20 years are going to be spectacularly different than, than the past 20, the past 50. And
just compounds.
It does.
It's almost impossible to imagine, like what it would look like, because it's like, if you look at like 20, 30 years ago, it's impossible to even imagine Netflix when you just had fax machines.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's not even a concept. So I bet we can't even imagine. Like, it's hard to
what's going to come next. Yeah, it's hard. The futurists can be pretty good at that, but it's really interesting. A lot of amazing stuff happening.
I feel like it's hard to be a futurist too. You just look at like what futurists, people that make those sort of predictions, and you go back 20 years, 40 years, 50 years at what people predicted things would happen, and it's like
where am I flying cars?
it's largely in cinema and that sort of thing, but it's just like, you are so off with some of that stuff.
Some things are really
usually
off,
things are actually more advanced than they predict or project in the past.
Yeah.
Seems like, I don't know.
Yeah, like NFTs, like those are some things that you never predicted.
Oh, no.
Like, how do you create scarcity? Like, art is only valuable because it's scarce. But like, creating that scarcity, that's like something that like I would have never even thought about. But yeah, I can see that.
When does the NFT bubble burst?
Oh yeah, is it still going? I thought like it burst like a. Are people still doing it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, if anything, it's picking up speed.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I thought the whole thing was like it's rare. Like, when there's so much of it, like how does the market still work?
Well, one of the trends that I understand, which is really interesting, is that, so the NFT world kind of grew up based on Ethereum, and now they figured out how to do some of that with the Bitcoin infrastructure and with Bitcoin stacks and whatnot. And this is knowledge I gained yesterday. So I'm, forgive me for the guys that talked to me about it yesterday. But the point is that opens up even larger degree of investment and interest, because there's so much money in Bitcoin. Right. And so when you figure out how to put the NFT piece on top of that, then all of a sudden it opens up everybody that are true believers in the way Bitcoin does the decentralized stuff that they do.
I was having a conversation this morning about somebody's friend who was making NFTs himself and selling them. I don't know what marketplace.
So he's minting them.
Yeah, he's minting them, making NFTs, and like sold thousands of dollars worth of NFTs.
Can you make a living off of that?
You probably could.
Oh my God!
Can you convert that to fiat?
This is a secondhand story, but this individual made thousands of dollars in a span of a few hours off the NFTs that they were just like making at home. Like
we had some guys in yesterday that shall remain nameless that created an exchange, and in a couple of weeks, it was a couple $100,000 they were making, and now they're looking to scale it. Dang. So it's still the wild, wild west. It's 1994 for the World Wide Web.
Okay,
as it relates,
so it'll possibly pop at some point.
Yeah, at some point it pops. There'll be winners and losers when you got that much volatility. We've also got in town here the Mycelium Network, and I don't know if you're familiar with those guys.
What is that?
But that is based on helium technology, which means nothing if you haven't looked at it. But what it really is it's decentralized network.
Okay.
And so what they're doing is they're getting businesses to take these 900 megahertz nodes, and you become essentially, think about it as almost like a Bitcoin miner, in that any of the data that gets processed and the activity you have on your node, you're actually earning coin for it. And so the theory is you've got this decentralized network with all these nodes and all these businesses, and all of a sudden
it's like compute. It's like they're decentralizing compute.
They're decentralizing Verizon and AT&T and whatnot. It's intended to be a wireless network for IoT and for other stuff
like wireless
that no one owns.
Interesting.
That no one owns, and you there's a monetization play for the businesses that host. And I probably really messed up the explanation, but there's essentially a monetization play for every node. Gotcha. So the way I think about it, being as old as I am, which is pretty old. In the early days of analog cellular, there was a land rush to gobble up the land rights to put rural service,
like those little towers.
The towers up in rural areas, because originally there was an A provider and a B provider in all the metropolitan areas when the FCC licensed the spectrum, and then they opened it up and said, well, we need nationwide coverage. Go figure out a way to get all this rural coverage, and so it was a bidding war to get the rural rights, and this feels very similar as it relates to that network. I think that this is the next layer of digital build out, and it's related to all of the blockchain stuff.
So it's almost
as well.
like there is a market, like there is a decentralized market that the supply and demand is sort of automatically regulated. So like you can crowdsource these network towers essentially.
Yeah.
Like people be like incentivized to create their own little, I'm going to go build this tower because it's worth this much Bitcoin or something.
That's true. And I would say overall, if you look at blockchain and some of the purist mindset, because there's so little trust in central governments, they really view this as a revolution in that the people take control, because no single government that may or may not be acting in everyone's best interest has control over any of it.
Yeah, centralization is always bad. Centralization will lead to monopolies.
Yeah,
and monopolies always
concentration of power.
Yeah, and I think decentralization is probably the way to go.
Yeah.
But then like trust in decentralized systems, or like the formation of new monopolies in a decentralized system. Yeah, that is also a problem too.
Yeah,
because they could just collude. Like these clusters could collude and just like try to mess with other clusters.
Well, I mean, if you look from the back to the beginning of civilization, so there's hunter-gatherers that were dispersed, and then they came together, and agriculture took over, and there was centralization. And I mean, the times of Rome, you had the barbarian tribes that were attacking Rome, that were kind of anarchists. It's the same thing all over.
Yeah, it's the feudal system.
People come together, and then they get pissed off because it's not going their way, and then there's anarchy, and they break apart, and it's this sort of sinusoidal wave of activity that's been the same since.
Yeah,
we had a lot more hair on our body. Absolutely.
So, okay, interesting.
That has nothing to do with supply chain, but here we go again, right?
That makes sense.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, are we at the land in the plane point?
Probably so.
Let's ask the question. Go ahead.
So the question we always ask, our land the plane question of every podcast guest we have is, if you had the opportunity to go back in time, hop into your time machine that was created by Elon Musk, that's it's on the blockchain and shoots you backwards or whatever. Go back in time. I mean, you're a young man, so just not go back that far. But before SupplyPike, before you met Dan and had the opportunity to give yourself advice, knowing what you know now, what might that be?
If I were to go back in time and give myself an advice, what would that be?
Go in the Wayback Machine.
Well, I don't know. I think, I could give the advice. Like, I know a lot more than I did back then. But like, I don't think if you told me those words, if I just told myself those words, they wouldn't mean anything to me, because like I didn't have the wisdom to understand what those words meant. And I think you almost have to go through the experiences of the failures and like the tribulations to really like, for the advice to mean something. Like the advice has to be like, oh, that's what that meant, like
it's like it dawns on you afterwards.
It dawns on you afterwards. Otherwise they're just words and you're like, oh, okay, well, sure. Like, so I feel like, I don't know if there's anything I could have said that would have just like blown my mind, because everything I know now, I kind of knew back then, but I didn't know it. I didn't internalize it. I didn't truly understand it. But it's now woven into my fabric. And
you had to walk the road in order for it to make sense.
So I don't know. I don't know.
It's kind of like advice that, my dad gave me through life.
Yeah, my dad could tell me this
whatever.
Stuff.
I'm smarter than you. I got this. And then it's
it really only seems like wisdom when you have time to reflect on it. To like, oh man, that makes
like, wow, he was right about every one of those things.
Everything that I know has existed as colloquialisms and aphorisms for like, millennia. I don't know if I could have told myself anything new that would have changed my mind, honestly. But
should have told yourself to buy art that you could sell as NFTs.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, yeah, buy Tesla stock.
buy Bitcoin in 2010.
Exactly.
They were literally giving it away for free.
Yeah, buy it then and don't spend it on a pizza. Just keep it. It'll be worth something.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Man, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks guys.
So before we go, where can our audience find out more about SupplyPike, and what's the best way if they wanted to learn more about you? What would be the best way to
Yeah, if you guys like to learn about SupplyPike, go to supplypike.com. If you're a supplier who serves a retailer, we can definitely help you guys out. If you're a 3PL or a partner, we'd love to talk to you guys and see if we can partner. If you're an engineer or a UX person or a product person, and if you want to work with other cool people, apply to SupplyPike. We're an awesome place to work.
You were totally ready for that question.
Yeah, I'm ready. Always plugging.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. It was great.
We appreciate you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
All right.